Our title is International Perspectives on Indo-Pacific Technology and Innovation Cooperation. We've got basically an hour, maybe a little bit less, because I'm going to keep us on time. Where our panel, I'm going to ask each panelist to offer 5 minutes of framing observations before we go into a moderated Q&A. But this is really for you. So when they finish their observations, I'm going to be looking to you. So if you've got a question, feel free to wave. Throw something at me, whatever, get my attention. There are no dumb questions. We're all trying to make sense of what's happening and what this means for Asia. So please, don't be shy. And with this, I'm going to start. I'm going to introduce our 4 panelists and then let them do their thing before we go to Q&A. First, Ambassador Robert Holleyman, who served as Deputy U.S. TR from 2014 to 2017, where he was responsible for U.S. trade and investment relations in Asia, as well as global trade policy and services, investment, IP, and innovation, and a bunch of other stuff. I should have said, I'm going to give you very condensed bios. If I went through their whole CVs, we'd be here all day. But most, to apologize to their mothers. Most recently, he served as president and CEO of Kroll Mooring International, as well as a partner at the law firm Kroll & Mooring, where he was part of the firm's international trade, privacy and cybersecurity and national security groups. And we're delighted he's just joined NBR's Board of Advisors. Next, we have Dr. Jungmi Cha, who is a research fellow in the Foreign Policy and Security Strategy Division at the National Assembly's Futures Institute. She's also an adjunct professor at her alma mater, Yonsei University, and serves as chair of the Chinese Politics Study Committee and the Korean Associations of International Studies, as well as chair of the Regional Cybersecurity Studies at the Korean Association of Cybersecurities. And her research is primarily focused on Chinese foreign affairs and security and U.S.-China technology competition. Then we have Mungo Woodifield, who serves as Minister Counsellor for the Trade and Global Issues at the British Embassy in the other Washington, where he oversees a very large portfolio on trade, economic, security, science and technology, and a bunch of other stuff. Then we're delighted to have joining us virtually Daisuke Kawai. He is Project Assistant Professor and Deputy Director of the Economic Security Research Program at the Research Center for Advanced Science and Technology at the University of Tokyo. His areas of expertise include Japan's foreign policy and economic security with special focus on critical and emerging technologies. He is also a non-resident fellow here at NBR. So now I'm going to pass the baton to Ambassador Holleyman, and he'll get us started. Robert?
Great. Thank you, Tami, and thanks so much for the opportunity to be here today. I really want to thank the National Bureau of Asian Research for the invitation, for the opportunity to be part of your ongoing work. I thank Microsoft, the Korea Foundation, and K&O Gates for their support of this event. I'm delighted to be part of this panel with my longtime friend, Tami Overby, with my fellow panelists. There's a lot to talk about in Indo-Pacific technology and the opportunities for cooperation, but I think I'm sort of the designated American voice here speaking to what's happening in the United States now. So I will sort of confine my remarks at the beginning to giving a U.S. perspective on where we are in the world of technology. Let me just note that in talking about this, I'm speaking in my personal capacity, not representing the views of any particular company or organization. And it's, having been in government before, it's a real privilege to actually be able to speak candidly about the observations that I have. Let me give a quick sense of kind of where I think the Trump administration is on technology policy in its second term. I'll briefly contrast that with where they were in their first term. And then I'll make a few quick comments about how that may differ and where it does differ from the Biden administration, and then also the Obama administration, where I served both at USTR in the second term and on the President's Advisory Committee on Trade Policy in his first term. Let me just note that I think that the landscape for these sort of three different presidents really has changed as the nature of technology has changed. When President Obama came in office and I started working with him on trade policy issues, we had sort of 3G mobile technology. We're now sort of 5G and 6G. We had, as quaint as it seems, Blu-ray video players. We have streaming. AI was in its infancy in 2008 when Obama was elected, and now it's increasingly part of our daily life. Major new advances in quantum computing, cloud computing has gone from early stages to now a fundamental part of how the tech ecosystem works, and it's clear for being here in Seattle of how important that is to technology leaders here. But we've also seen a dramatic rise in China's role in the world and its role in technology. And I think it's pretty clear that they are sort of the number 2 leader globally in most technology innovations, with the United States still ahead. But we've also seen from a U.S. perspective increasing heightened concerns about China's growth in technology, the means of state-supportive investments, and a lot of the U.S. positions on technology are no longer around technology in and of itself, but they're also around the U.S. competition and strategic competition globally, including with China. So how have we seen this playing out? Well, we'll have a panel later today talking about artificial intelligence, so I won't get into that in any depth except to say that I think on his third day in office, President Trump in his second term issued an executive order withdrawing the Biden administration executive order on AI. There's a new expedited process that's moving forward for President Trump to determine what the White House position is on AI. I think it's fair to say that it's probably more business friendly, likely to be an outcome than the Biden administration, which tried to sort of balance safety and responsibility issues and business related issues. Again, we'll talk about that more later, but obviously a huge issue in U.S. technology policy. And Trump won in his first term in office. We also saw the president leaning in very heavily on binding digital trade rules. They were really codified in the revision of NAFTA, so the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that was approved by Congress in 2019. There were a series of rules related to cross-border data transfers, to privacy and the APEC CBPRs that were all codified as part of that. I'll say that those built upon work we had done in the Obama administration in the TPP, now the CPTPP, to put a series of binding digital rules in place. Those are now in place in the CPTPP. And I want to commend the UK for having joined the CPTPP at the end of last year and accepting those obligations in the digital realm. But Trump went even beyond that with a digital technology agreement with Japan. And so we've really seen the Trump administration sort of lead into supporting binding obligations in the area of digital trade. And I think if you look at the statement that came out of USTR about a week ago in their trade policy proposal for 2025, they also talk about looking at regional or plurilateral agreements as a way of potentially dealing with sectoral issues. So I see that as a way that the U.S. may be leaning into continuing to lead on digital trade issues, whether they're part of a comprehensive agreement or they're standalone, like the U.S.-Japan agreement. Of course, we also enter this year where I think the biggest question on trade is what's the impact of tariffs? And that is, as we see from today's news, yesterday's news, it continues to change as the president shows his high regard for the use of tariffs as a negotiating tool, as a way to try to drive, in his view, manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., and as a way of achieving other foreign policy objectives. But I think in this world focus on tariffs, we're also likely to see issues like digital trade issues. They won't be getting the top line headlines, but I think we see from past history and comments that we've already seen from USTR that they're likely to be part of trade agreements that the U.S. negotiates, even though they're not the ones that generate attention. Let me just make a couple of more comments. Why do I think digital trade matters from a U.S. perspective? And the answer is, one, substantively, it's an important part of the U.S. economy. But secondly, it's also where the dollars are. U.S. exports of digitally delivered services were $655 billion in 2023. That far outstripped the imports from the U.S. So the U.S. has about a $270 billion surplus in digitally delivered services. And in goods that are digitally enabled, the U.S. exports are about $750 billion. So simply based on such big numbers, digital trade has a huge impact on the U.S. economy, on U.S. exports. And so I think given the Trump administration's prior record on digital trade, I think you're likely to see this continue to be a key issue going forward. Let me conclude with just a couple of comments on the Chips and Science Act. This issue is hot and it's top of mind. In 2022, Congress passed by substantial bipartisan vote the Chips and Science Act, and this built upon the Chips for America program that Congress approved in 2021. Now, this is really driven to try to bring home more domestic investments in semiconductors, particularly advanced semiconductors. It was driven because of national security and economic issues that really showed the challenge in the U.S. of not having a sufficient and robust supply access to semiconductors, and what the impact of that is from everything from autos to homes to advanced manufacturing to defense. And the data is compelling. The U.S. share of the global semiconductor fabrication fell from about almost 40%, so 36% in 1990 to as low as 10% in 2020. And the U.S. identified that there were significant economic and national security implications. I won't go into all the reasons. Some of those are geopolitical. Some of those were shown through the disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in 2022, in response, Congress passed this Chips and Science Act, which has about $39 billion for a fund investing in companies and about $11 billion for semiconductor R&D. Well, this has been an important incentive for more domestic investments, but President Trump, in his March 4th speech to Congress, altered his prepared text, turned to the Speaker of the House during his speech to Congress and said, we need to get rid of the CHIPS Act. He called it a horrible thing and said, quote, we give hundreds of billions of dollars and it doesn't mean a thing. So he was leaning into the view that if we just put higher tariffs on the imports of semiconductors, we don't need things like the Chips and Science Act, that we can simply rely on tariffs. We'll talk about this later, but let me note that I think what's likely to happen is that President Trump has that view. He will continue to articulate that view. Not entirely new, although raising in the State of the Union was unexpected. But we've also seen substantial pushback from a number of Republicans who were sponsors of that bill, whether it's Todd Young from Indiana or John Cornyn from Texas, who believe that there is indeed a national security challenge through the shortage of chips, think they probably believe that tariffs are not the answer to get us and help them meet those needs. I'll talk about this again further, but I think we end up with some version where Congress is unlikely to repeal the CHIPS and Sciences Act. They're likely to change some of the things around the parameters of where the administration can act on its own. But I doubt that many members of Congress believe that the president's tariffs-only approach is the right approach to deal with it. So my sense, and I don't speak for anyone other than me, is that we're likely to see the status quo continue in CHIPS and Sciences. But what we are not going to see is what people, even around President Trump, had been talking about before, which is, do we need a CHIPS and Sciences 2.0? And I think most observers believe that that act was good, but not sufficient. So I'll be happy to talk about this later in a rapidly changing environment. Thank you.
Very much, Robert. Thanks very much, Robert. You gave us a lot there, and we will definitely come back to it. Now I'd like to go to Dr. Cha.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Cha, Jungmi Cha. I am an editor of that report, recently published, the U.S. RK Tech Cooperation. And thank you for the DOE to cooperate with this report. Actually, I'm not a technologist expert, and I'm not a kind of trade or economic expert. I am a political scientist researching the geopolitics of technology and the intersection of technology, security, diplomacy, particularly on China and U.S.-China rivalry. So the views I'm here, sharing the views is just my own, not representing the government or institution. I think we have an expert from the UK and from the Japan and the diplomat from the UK. But I think that we have some overlapping perspectives on the evolving geopolitics of technology, particularly regarding the rapid advancement of disruptive technologies and intensifying geopolitical tensions, especially the great power rivalry. South Korea is one of the most innovative countries, ranking 6th globally, and it is also a global manufacturing powerhouse with a strong presence in diverse sectors, including semiconductors, battery, bio, automobiles, and shipbuildings, ranking 6th in global manufacturing output. Moreover, South Korea has a strong defense industry. As a key player in advanced technology manufacturing and global supply chains, South Korea is well aware of the challenges and opportunities arising from the shifting geopolitical landscape. To strengthen its governance structure in this field, South Korea has already launched the National AI Committee and National Bio Committee and National Quantum Research Committee. And facing these challenges, South Korea policy priorities have relied on accelerating the critical emerging technology innovation. So if you follow the news release from the South Korean government and companies, you will see a lot of daily updates on AI, quantum, and other critical emerging technologies. And South Korea is expanding the funding, launching new initiatives, and forming national committees on critical emerging technologies. And recently, we announced that in 2025, South Korea government will invest $4.7 billion in 12 national strategic technologies, around $7.45 billion Science and Technology Innovation Fund will be launched to invest in AI, quantum, and advanced biotechnology over the next 5 years. So the government has designated 3 game-changing technology. That 3 technology will be the artificial intelligence chips, advanced biotechnology, and quantum. So with this, a lot of investment on the technology innovation, the other factor is the most important is that collective innovation. Collective innovation is essential to securing technological leadership and critical and emerging technology, because I think we have very similar challenges from the changing geopolitics technology, because we have recent emergence of DeepSeek has served as a wake-up call for the South Korea, reinforcing the need for rapid technological advancement. South Korea's Minister of Science and ICT recently stated that South Korea AI Act, currently under review, aims to encourage innovation while minimizing regulatory burdens to support AI development. So I think we will more have collaboration with the foreign actors for that AI development. Technological cooperation between the United States and South Korea is more important than ever. That's the most important critical factor for South Korean international technology collaboration. I think we established some kind of a dialogue, technology dialogue, so-called that the New Generation Critical and Emerging Technology Dialogue in 2023, which accelerates cooperation in 6 strategic technology: AI, quantum, bio, semiconductor, and batteries. So we also have the Boston Korea project for biotechnology cooperation, and we announced a joint statement on US-ROK cooperation in quantum information science and technology. Beyond the South Korean US collaboration, South Korea has been actively engaging in international collaboration. With the ASEAN, we had established the ASEAN-ROK think tank dialogue on economic trade policy. ROK and Singapore had the collaboration in AI and biotechnology. And Korea is the first Asian country to join the Horizon Europe as an associate member. And we joined the NATO Science and Technology Organization as a partner country, paving the way for joint R&D in defense and emerging technologies. And South Korea's strategy to navigate the evolving technological landscape is built on 2 fundamental pillars. One is advancing and investing huge investment in the technological innovation, especially AI, quantum, and biotechnology. And the other pillar is expanding the global collaboration to enhance competitiveness and technological resilience. And the challenges ahead stem not only from the intensifying global tech competition. I think this geopolitical instability and the increasing uncertainty and unpredictability of policy environments in Trump's second term. Next 3 to 4 years will be the critical period for the maintaining enhancing the South Korean technological leadership, because probably next 3 or 10 years, 3 or 4 years, Chinese investment in AI and the other critical technology will be leaping up a lot. Recently they announced huge investment for AI and the other critical technology. And then Chinese big tech, they announced a lot and a huge investment in AI for next 3 or 4 years. And then we think that next 3 or 4 years will be very critical for maintaining the technological edge for the South Korea and for the other like-minded country and United States too. So I think we need to collaborate on this critical technology, such as semiconductor, AI, and battery and biotechnology. So that will be very critical for us to maintain the global leadership and global technological edge in this critical emerging technology. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Cha. Now let's go to Mungo Woodifield.
Thank you, Tami, and good morning, everyone. As Tami mentioned in the introduction, I am a serving government official, so I won't be speaking in my personal capacity, and will have to be a bit more diplomatic, possibly, than my fellow panelists, but I will still try to be as honest and insightful as I can be. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful for the invitation to talk to you. I'd like to say a little bit about how the UK views technology in the Indo-Pacific and explain why we're engaged, and then just take a moment to talk about what my government is doing to try to get behind growth of a technology sector in the UK and some of the opportunities and the risks that we see, particularly with a focus on artificial intelligence. But starting from the top, you may be asking why a UK diplomat is at a Pacific Technology Policy Conference. And the reality is because British interests are so heavily engaged in the region. First of all, you have our really strong partnership with allies like the United States, Korea, Japan, and others. You also have the reality that for technology, our supply chains are dependent on the region. And so we have to be engaged to protect those supply chains. And then, as both my panelists have mentioned, there is the undeniable rising geopolitical competition between the United States and China, and technology is a vector through which that competition is increasingly being played out. And so, for us, having a view to technology in the Indo-Pacific is essential to our prosperity and security in the UK. Take DeepSeek as an example of where technology continues to surprise us and disrupt our expectations and assumptions. It was a wake-up call, I think, to many of us, the progress that the Chinese AI model had made, and it sort of galvanized us in the UK, but also I know colleagues in Washington, D.C. And across the United States to think about how the West can keep its technological edge. And I think that's very important for us because we believe that technology is not values agnostic. The technology as it's developed will encode values and principles. And for us in the UK, it's important that we ensure that the technologies that define the future represent the sort of democratic values that we hold so dear in our country and do not derive from more authoritarian systems. And so for all those reasons, our engagement in the Indo-Pacific on the issue of technology is only going to grow. And as Ambassador Holleyman mentioned, we're really proud of the fact that we joined CPTPP last year, the first non-founding member to join that bloc. That sort of shows our economic commitment to the region. And also in terms of security, we established the AUKUS partnership, Australia, UK, US, which is, the headline is it's about submarines, but there's also a really important sort of pillar 2 of that agreement, which is cooperation between Australia, UK, and US on critical and emerging technologies. And that's something that we're really focused on. And then I should say most recently, another sort of sign of our commitment in this area is my Prime Minister was here and met with President Trump on the 27th of February. They talked a lot about tariffs, which is another part of my job. But technology is an exciting component of their discussion, and they agreed to work really fast on an economic deal between our two countries with advanced technology at its core. And what we're looking at there is how we can stimulate even more cooperation between our tech and science sectors. The UK is the third country in the world with $1 trillion tech sector. As I said, we want to help Western technological edge. And so we feel like any way we can combine the UK's strengths with the US's and with other partners is going to give us the best opportunity to win that race. I'd like to talk a little bit just about what we're doing in the UK to take advantage of AI. Because my government announced something called the AI Opportunities Action Plan recently and recognized that we have a good start with AI, the third largest AI market in the world, valued at almost $100 billion. We have some blue chip AI companies, DeepMind, Arm, Wave, but we need to do more to stimulate that growth in our country. And so through our plan, we are committing to grow our compute capacity in the UK by 20-fold. We're creating AI growth zones, and in particular, the importance there is ensuring that the energy infrastructure is there to be able to build data centers that power AI development. And we've also looking very closely at how we can unlock the innovation potential of our health data. We have a national health service in the UK, and what that means is we have incredibly high quality data around health with a very wide data set, which we think is going to be extremely interesting in terms of unlocking the potential of healthcare development using AI and biotechnology. So that's what we're trying to do. A key element to that is regulation. It is really important that we regulate lightly, that we are on the side of innovators with companies. And so we are determined to remove barriers around AI regulation. And we set up something called the Regulatory Innovation Office that we hope will help us in that journey. Another principle is we want to work really closely with like-minded international partners. So we want to pool our resources, particularly around compute, so that that capability can be shared amongst researchers and scientists around the world. And we've got a 10-year compute plan to look at how we can foster international collaboration. I've talked a lot there about the opportunities. We're also conscious of the risks, and I'll just finish on this point. We set up something called the AI Security Institute in the UK that looks at the risks, the national security risks posed by frontier AI models. We're not blind to those risks. We believe that there's more opportunity than risk there, and we should always bear that in mind. But we have a very rigorous testing model, and we have some absolutely world-leading computer scientists in our Security Institute that looks at how these AI models can present threats in terms of cyber, chem, bio, overriding their own safeguards, and the autonomy of some of these models. And we've been sharing some of those results with our like-minded partners and allies because we think it's a really important dimension of international cooperation on technology, is that we are working together to protect ourselves against the risks, whilst at the same time working together to seize the opportunities. I'll stop there and look forward to some questions.
Well done, keeping the time. Now for our last panelist, please join, we're going to have Professor Daisuke Kawai. Professor, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, we hear you well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daisuke Kawai, and here to AM, Japan, but I would say that good morning to everyone. And first of all, I would like to extend my gratitude to NBR for having me. I'm sorry that I can't join in person in Seattle this time, but it's truly a pleasure to participate in such a wonderful event virtually. I have recently joined the NBR as a fellow, and today's presentation is my first contribution in this role. Today, I will discuss Japan's approach to technology in the Indo-Pacific region. As we know, the Indo-Pacific is becoming the global center for strategic competition, not just mutually, but increasingly through the advanced technology. In recent years, Japan has positioned itself as a critical player in shaping a stable, resilient regional order and an innovation-driven economic. Japan's policy approach has evolved notably over the past decade. Under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe from 2012 to 2020, Japan first articulated economic security as an integral to national security policy. Prime Minister Suga from 2020 to 2021 then deepened this agenda, emphasizing domestic digital transformation through the creation of Japan's digital agency. Then the Prime Minister Kishida from 2021 to 2024 to institutionalize these priorities through the Economic Security Promotion Act, which I was involved in the legislating, the tackling the supply chain vulnerabilities and the technology protection. So now under Prime Minister Shigeo Ishiba, Japan's approach has further matured, prioritized the self-sufficiency in semiconductors, responsible AI governance, strengthens the regional technology alliance. So I would outline Japan's digital transformation strategies, economic security initiatives, and the regional partnerships, particularly under the current Ishiba administration. So while reflecting briefly on the dynamics introduced by a recent return of President Trump to the White House as well, the digital transformation is a central pillar of Japan's strategies. So Japan views digital leadership as critical to both economic prosperity and geopolitical influence. In recent years, Japan has significantly accelerated the development of the digital infrastructure, notably through the advanced telecommunications networks and the cutting-edge semiconductor capabilities. So in telecommunications, Japan has championed the development of Open Radio Access Network, Open RAN technologies. So Open RAN promotes greater interoperability, flexibility, and scalability and future telecom infrastructures. So by supporting an open ecosystem, Japan seeks to avoid the reliance on single vendor or country. So particularly in the rising geopolitical tensions surrounding. So Japanese companies like NEC, NTT, Rakuten are actively cooperating with the Indo-Pacific partners, particularly in ASEAN countries and India, to implement open networks. In AI, China has also taken on a leadership role in frameworks. So most AI process initiated at the G7 summit hosted by Prime Minister Kishida in 2023. So this process emphasizes the transparency, human rights protection, and the responsible innovation. The principles Japan could promote regionally and globally, particularly as AI technologies advance rapidly under the current Ishiba administration. So perhaps most significantly, Japan is heavily investing in the semiconductor self-sufficiency. Once a dominant semiconductor manufacturer globally, Japan's share of global production dropped dramatically from over 50% in the late 1980s to less than 10% today. These vulnerabilities, Japan launched Lapidus, which is a public-private partnership investing billions to develop domestically produced advanced semiconductors by 2027. So 2-nanometer high-end chips. So given the increased uncertainty surrounding international trade policy under the new Trump administration, so achieving semiconductor self-sufficiency has become an even more critical strategic priority for Japan. Let me talk about the economic security. So economic security is Japan's broader national security and technological strategies. So events such as the COVID-19 pandemic, Ukraine crisis, and the growing US-China geopolitical competition have revealed significant chains, especially in critical technologies and the recognizing these vulnerabilities, Japan introduced the Economic Security Act, and in 2022, this landmark legislation plans of economic security, the focusing on explicitly on securing supply intellectual properties and robust infrastructure. And the initiative framework is to Surprising Resilience Initiative. So established in Australia in 2021, this trilateral framework is strategically the region's dependency on any single supplier country, particularly China, the third investment and the strategic partnership. Japan's strategic investment in years in semiconductor industries exemplify this approach. They're helping to diversify production based on and create a reliable alternative to existing supply chain models. The furthers Japan's partnership with Australia to secure critical minerals such as lithium and the rare earth elements essential for batteries in the semiconductor production. so highlights another critical dimension of its economic security strategies. So both governments have enhanced their collaboration in mining and refining and ensuring the sustainable, the secure supply of these materials. And moreover, the infrastructure security has emerged as an essential component of Japan's economic security policy. So the Indo-Pacific is a strategic battleground for cybersecurity for sure. And particularly given the rise of a digital threat of originating from various threat state and non-state actor, Japan has increased its cooperation with the Indo-Pacific nations, particularly ASEAN, to build cybersecurity infrastructure and provide a capacity building initiative. Under the Prime Minister Ishiba, economic security has further matured, I would say. His administration places a particular emphasis on multilateral cooperation. The Quad, the grouping with the US, Australia, India, as you may know, that this emphasis is strategic, considering the mission of the administration, which has historically adopted a more transactional approach to alliances, promoting Japan to diversify and deepen other strategic partnerships to maintain the stable economic security policies in respective of potential shift in the US policy. Some people may think that the return of President Trump brings uncertainty, notably in alliance cohesion and commitment, with character by skepticism toward multilateral frameworks and alliances. But however, the Trump thinks that the Quad itself is established by himself. Surely this is a little wrong fact, I would say, but anyway, he's keen on the Quad and the further Quad to work on the critical technology cooperation. That's a good thing for Japan, honestly. When it comes to AUKUS on Pillar 2, as mentioned by fellow panelists, so Japan is strongly willing to join the AUKUS Pillar 2 due to the lack of enough cybersecurity technology capability. Japan is still not ready to join, considering the nature of a Pillar 2, which is an invention of sensitive critical technologies in line with military usage. So Japan is working on now the bill of active cyber defense. So once the bill has passed, I think Japan is ready to go. How many time do I have? But I may speed up to finish what I want to say. When it comes to regional cooperation and partnerships, so Japan-India partnership is essential in this regard. India's rapid digital transformation and the semiconductor ambitions align closely with Japan's strategic interest. So in recent years, have seen significant Japanese investment in joint ventures in India. And in all areas, let's say the smart city project, and these partnerships reduces the strategic dependency to foster innovation and strengthen bilateral ties. Similarly, Japan's also long-standing relationship with ASEAN has also further expanded it into the technological cooperation as well. I will elaborate in my Q&A session. So, in conclusion, Japan's Indo-Pacific technology policy provides proactive domestic measures with strategic international partnerships that through the robust digital transformation, reinforce economic security, and expanded regional cooperation. Japan seeks to ensure long-term resilience and competitiveness. Under the current administration, the strategy is evolving. Japan is responding by strengthening domestic self-sufficiency in critical technologies such as semiconductors. And I will stop here for your question and our discussion.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got a very short time for Q&A. We've got 10 minutes, so we want to do a lightning round. I turn to the audience first. Who's got burning questions? If not, I have a whole page of them. But again, you're the guest, so I'm going to be polite. Okay, I see a hand in the back. Sir, a microphone is coming to you. Look how quickly that young man runs.
I'm trying to work out whether. So I saw an interesting thing this week. I saw a demonstration of an AI system designing hardware, right? And that's sort of normal. That's starting to become the normal. AI is wonderful. It's doing interesting stuff. But what they did was in the demonstration, they took a research paper and they just put it into the AI system and then said, change this processor to reflect this research paper. And it did it in real time as I was watching the demonstration. It happened to be my company's research paper, so that was even more interesting. And it even came to a conclusion that the research paper didn't have. So the people writing the research paper didn't add that conclusion into the paper. So the question is, from a cooperation and innovation and IP side of the world, we're probably moving to a very different world where, patents become really very obsolete because, there's no way to trace them. There's no way to really deal with them. So from a sort of international sort of policy type world and thinking part of it, where do the panelists think that this may go? I'm just giving an example of something that sort of shows a different level of knowledge and information change in industry. It's no longer the implementation people are important. It's actually the ideas people are becoming important.
Okay, and we're running short on time, so I'm going to quickly turn to the panel and see if anybody would like to address that. Ambassador Holleyman, I can always count on you. Thank you.
Thank you. A great question. I'll actually answer that by saying I think there will be tools to be able to deal with the IP and related issues, but I also want to make a shout out to Korea for some of the work they're doing. This year, Korea is the host for APEC, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. Last time, 2 years ago, the U.S. was the host. Last time I was in Seattle was in the U.S. host year. But let me just note a couple of things that Korea is doing with their APEC host year. They're hosting an AI and digital ministerial. So the first time that one of those is being held, and it's sort of building off of some work that Korea did with the AI Safety Summit that they held in Seoul last year, I believe. Korea wants to host an AI standards forum as part of APEC this year during Digital Week. And then at the ministers responsible for trade meeting in Korea in June, there's also going to be a discussion on AI and emerging technology for trade facilitation. So I just pull those out to say that I think there are several forums, whether they're binding or non-binding like APEC, where the kind of issues you raised are being discussed. I mean, how those all get resolved by governments remains to be seen. I think the U.S. probably has some preferences for things like the G7 and other places to deal with it. But I think these issues are very much top of mind. And again, I want to acknowledge the leading work that Korea is doing this year at APEC around AI.
Also, NBR is going to be collaborating with our friends. The National Center for APEC is also in Seattle. So, and as you mentioned, the SOM 3 is going to be in Incheon, July 26th through August 15th. And the ministers responsible for trade meeting, and again, all the 21 economies participate in these meetings. That's going to be in Jeju, the lovely island of Jeju, May 15th through 16th, and I will be at that one. Okay, next question. And if you could also please identify yourself. Sir, please.
Talk about
No problem.
I'm Andy brought up from Stanford.
Can you, just so Daisuke can hear it as well?
Thank you. Andy Grotto from Stanford University. If you take China out of this conversation, it's a very different one, right? And China's not standing still. It's an adaptive actor. And I'm curious for your all's perspective on how you see China responding to this slew of initiatives that you all have laid out.
That's a great question. I'm going to go to Dr. Cha first, and then maybe Mungo.
Actually, this year in Chinese session has focused on AI, and there are a lot of specific technology terms such as AI smartphone, AI PC, and humanoid robots, and that's appeared in the public report. And I think that probably I thought that in next 3 or 4 years very critical because DeepSeek has a very important aspects. DeepSeek moment is very important for China because DeepSeek plays a kind of a political values and strategic values for Chinese future in emerging critical technology, because that has kind of very symbol of resilience against the U.S. technology restriction. They are presenting the value of DeepSeek as a kind of confidence of Chinese innovation, Chinese style of innovation. That's kind of probably there will be the very important political source and strategic source for the CCPs to have more legitimate and more confidence in their statecraft. So I think that next 3 or 4 years, remaining the 3 years of Xi Jinping's third term, that will be the critical period for Chinese company and Chinese government to invest hugely in the AI for their showing their achievement through their political leadership and mobilizing the company. And if you see that Alibaba, and then Alibaba announced that they're 5.5 billion something, then for the AI and cloud and computing in next 3 years. And the Huawei CEO, he announced that they may achieve to have 70% self-reliance of semiconductor in China. I think they are much more having confidence from the DeepSeek moment. And then that may be the very driving force for China to have more confidence and more energy to boost up those kind of critical emerging technology.
Mungo?
Thank you. Very briefly, so I think that the UK has a pragmatic relationship with China. It trades with China. There's our ministers travel there to discuss cooperation. All of that, though, has to be calibrated so as to ensure that we are protected from any kind of national security threats. I think what will be interesting and a challenge for diplomats is as export controls, investment screening, and the like kind of ramps up around technology, and we've already seen it under the last US administration, it will continue under this administration, and countries are having to make decisions about where they export their critical technology, where they take investment from, whether that triggers retaliation from China. We've already seen they've put in place limits on exports of critical minerals. If that sort of expands, then it will confront countries with choices, and that could be difficult for some.
Ambassador, sorry.
I just will have to raise one point, focal point. I think the other most important thing is that collaboration on AI, with the inclusive way, because China has pursued the Global South collaboration in the AI, and they established a lot of BRICS SCO collaboration in AI technology, and then they announced that they will have Global South Research Center, and I think they had already established some kind of open science collaboration, something mechanism initiative. So I think we are kind of lacking that kind of a framework for including those kind of global south for AI development collaboration, AI governance collaboration. Thank you.
Ambassador?
I'll just conclude by saying I think that it's not a zero-sum game on AI. I mean, U.S. companies are global leaders. Chinese companies are global leaders. I don't see anything that's sort of going to change that dynamic. I think there is heightened geopolitical tensions, And certainly some of the U.S. actions are very much to try to make sure that the U.S. can remain the global leader in AI. But I don't think there's anything that sort of suggests that China is not going to be one of the major global leaders. So there are places where the U.S. and China also then cooperate. And I'll again make a reference to Korea's work this year around APEC, where both China and the U.S. are participants, and some of the work that's happening around AI. So I think there's strategic competition. I think there's high levels of commercial competition, but I also think that there are and there need to be continued areas of cooperation.
And I'm going to end with 2 points. China is hosting APEC next year in 2026. So these conversations that are happening around AI and digital in Korea are so critical because they will continue. And then 2027, I think it's Vietnam. And my last point is I have great questions that I didn't get to ask, and I'm really sorry, but they were genius. You all would have appreciated them. But can you please join me in keeping us on time and thanking our panel? Thank you very much.